那大家晚上好欢迎来到我们今晚的直播我是今晚的主持人赵玉红今天我们要聊的话题是中国企业出海欧洲必须知道的关键问题这几年呢，越来越多的中国企业把欧洲视为一个重要的海外市场但与此同时呢，欧洲也是一个非常容易被低估，也非常容易被误读的市场它不是一个单一的市场，也不是把国内经验简单复制过去就能成功的地方。所以呢，今晚呢，我们希望呢和大家一起更清楚的看一看，对于中国企业来说，欧洲市场到底意味着什么？哪些误区最容易被忽视？哪些挑战呢最值得提前准备？又有哪些现实的机会值得真正的把握？在开始之前呢，我也想先介绍一下我们今晚一起对谈的嘉宾Matthew 呢是 Innovation is Everywhere， 也就是创新无边界的创始人兼 CEO， 长期与欧洲的还有亚洲的企业高管合作专注于创新、学习探索跨市场的认知。今晚呢，他也会从自己的经验出发，帮助我们一起理解为什么真正理解一个市场需要往往走进现场，走进人走进具体的语境。So before we start, I also like to invite Matthew to introduce himself. Could you? Yes.
Thank you. 大家好，我叫 Matthew，非常荣幸，今天能和大家在一起，演讲我代表相信我且欢迎大家的到来。So I'm very happy to be with you tonight. I'm Mathieu Hamel from Innovation is Everywhere. I'm happy to share more about how Chinese company and Chinese leader can explore the European ecosystem and the European market. And happy to be with you, Jade and David.
Great. Thank you. 谢谢Matthew 的介绍。那接下来呢，我将会隆重的介绍我们今晚的嘉宾 David。David 呢是法国的投资人、作家也是长期观察中欧关系的重要声音。他的著作包括 Welcome to the War Economy。多年来呢，他一直从欧洲与中国之间的商业、资本和地缘的政治变化中观察企业和市场如何定位。那么，如果我们今天想要讨论中国企业应该如何更现实地看待欧洲、理解欧洲，并要找到可持续的进入的路径，那么 David 无疑是一个非常值得聆听的嘉宾。So now let me warmly introduce our guest speaker, David. David is French investor, author, and a well-known observer of China-European relationship. He is the author of books including Welcome to the War Economy. For many years, he has been analyzed how business, capitals, and geopolitics are shaping the relationship between Europe and to China. So if we want to discuss how Chinese company can read Europe more realistically, understand it more deeply, and find a more sustainable path into the market, David is exactly the kind of voice we should listen to tonight. So at the beginning, I think we will have 3 parts. So before we start, I also want David maybe to just give us something to give us some of the comments. So 那今晚呢，我们的直播大概分为3个部分首先呢 David 会做一个开场的分享，谈谈他眼中的这个欧洲市场以及中国企业最容易忽视的这个关键的问题然后呢，接下来我们会有一段的主持的对话，从误区、挑战到机会逐步展开呢。最后呢，我们也会留出时间回答大家在评论区的问题。So David, let me hand over to you first. From your vantage point between China and Europe, what do you think Chinese business leaders most often misunderstood or most often overlook about Europe today? So over to you, David.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm very glad to be here tonight because you mentioned one of my books, but there's, I don't know if you can see, there's this one called China and Europe, The Turning Point, which I wrote in 2019 to say that to me, the 20th century was a century where Europe and the US got closer together. And the 21st century would be the century where Europe and China would get closer to each other. So for me, this is something which is very much in my heart, sitting here in Hong Kong. So I'm very glad to first maybe be able to remind the audience that first, Europe is a very attractive region, despite all the bashing you read in the press. First, because you've got 450 million people with high purchasing power. Comparable purchasing power in mainland is just limited to 100 million people. So Europe is 4 times bigger as an addressable market for many, many products. And secondly, from just an historical perspective, if you look at humankind, over time, half of the ideas of the new discoveries in the world have come historically from Europe. So it's a region full of creativity where I think of which anybody in the world can benefit. Having said that, I wrote my book in 2019, and since 2022, post-COVID, unfortunately, things have not gone in the right direction in terms of, and I'm talking about the political front, between China and Europe, which is going to make it more complicated for Chinese companies to come to Europe than they think. Europe has this view of a second Chinese shock since COVID. And I'll just give you one statistic so that you understand. When we look at what we call the Production Pricing Index, or the PPI, there is, if you compare 2022 and 2025, there is a 40 points difference now between the cost in China and the cost in Europe. So if you produce at 100 cost in Europe, you produce only at 60 in China. And the 40 points difference is a source of arguments between our politicians, where Europe says it's all coming from subsidies and overcapacity, and China says, like Matthew, probably it's all coming from innovation. So you, as a Chinese entrepreneur, you cannot make the assumption that you are politically welcome in Europe. You're obviously welcome by the local entrepreneurs that want to team up with you and do JVs and do business together, but the political front, unfortunately, is not working in your direction. So what do you have to do? What should you expect in terms of attitude? And I think the one is that you should look very much at complementarity with European entrepreneurs. You should not come on your own to Europe because you're likely to fail for different reasons. First, the go-to-market is very different because Europe is very fragmented. It's around 30 different local markets, which means that you will need very different local distribution, and there's no way as a Chinese that you can manage this on your own. Secondly, the concept of service is very different. So even if you sell a product, it's going to be high value added product. It comes with some service attached. And typically the aftermarket service in Europe is far more developed, and you will need local input for the local service. Remember, the demographics are completely different. So the service expected is going to be completely different because you have a single child civilization in China, whereas in Europe, the average family is made up of a couple and 2 kids. So the expectations in terms of local service are completely different. Then, over the last 2 years, the concept of security has become prominent and is even more important than efficiency. So security, and you see it in lots of industries. Typical example would be energy, renewable energy, where the European view from the politicians is that the security is more important than whatever efficient solutions you've got to. So it's not because you've got a cost advantage that Europeans are going to buy your product if they think that they create a dependency on you and that they are going to lose in terms of resilience. Then you got data protection. So if your business is linked to data, there's obviously very specific data legal framework in Europe, which means that you cannot come with the Chinese legal system when it comes to the data industry and think that you can translate it into Europe. And final point I would mention is cultural. You Chinese entrepreneurs have an unbelievable agility to evolve in what I would call an environment of mistrust. So even if there is no trust in the business you're doing, you manage still to pull up some business relationship and make things happen. In Europe, fortunately or unfortunately, trust is absolutely everything. So we Europeans do not do business if we don't see trust attached. And therefore, you'll have to come up with a way of creating trust with your European ecosystem because, and you'll be frustrated because in many, many cases, you know how to deal with mistrust that we Europeans are unfortunately incapable to deal with. So that's what I wanted to say as an introduction. I would say the environment is not as favorable as it should be. The perception in Europe is that China is decoupling from the West, not only from the US, but also from Europe. But it doesn't mean that you cannot do business because, again, the view of European entrepreneurs I talk to is very, very keen. They're actually very, very keen to do business with China. And I think it comes, I'll take BYD as an example. You know, BYD, when they come to Europe and they open a plant in Hungary, they say, we start with a 30 points cost advantage, 30. And when we open, so when we're in China and we sell a Chinese product to Europe, and when we open in Hungary, this 30 points advantage roughly halves. So we end up with 15 points, 1.5. And so the view of experts is to say, when you look at the advantages of a Chinese company operating from China, the European view at this stage is that if you're a politician, you say 15 points are coming from subsidies and overcapacity. And when you're European entrepreneurs, you say 15 points are coming from the way that China is working in a different manner. China is the best entrepreneurs in China are innovating in a different way from Europe, and this is what I want to learn. So my advice would be, if you come to Europe, convince people that the advantage you are bringing to Europe is not coming from subsidies from the Chinese government. It's not coming from overcapacity in your industry. It's coming from another way of working on being much quicker, trial and error, being vertically integrated, etc., being much more keen to do data analysis and iteration and improve the product, do product release much quicker than we do in Europe. And if you convince your European partners that this is fair competition and fair competitive advantage, then I think you've got a fantastic opportunity in Europe because Europe has never needed China so much. But conversely, when we see the lack of growth in the Chinese market, especially in consumption, which for us external observers is close to zero, we also think that China has never needed Europe so much at a time when the United States has decided to close its market to China. So that's what I want to say as a start, and I'll be very happy to take questions.
Good. Thank you, David. Thank you for your, you mentioned trust, and then you also tell us an important frame for all of us. And Europe is not a market that is as easy to enter as it may appear from the outside. Let's now go on step deeper into some of the key questions behind that. So first, you also mentioned trust is very important. So if you had to name some of the things and one maybe most important thing, what is the single biggest misconceptions like Chinese business leaders have when they think about entering Europe? Yes, David.
My gut feeling is that at this stage, Chinese entrepreneurs think that it's going to be easy to come to Europe, and that they are going to be welcome to Europe because, for example, they come with a product or a service which is cheaper than what's happening in Europe. And unfortunately, this argument is very strong in what I call an economy of peace, where the world is wonderful and everybody works together, which is basically what we had since between 2001, when China joined WTO, and 2020, the start of COVID. So we had 20 years where this type of argument was very powerful. And unfortunately, since 2022, because of the geopolitical tensions we have, the key criteria has become dependency. If I buy your product, am I becoming dependent on you? So the trick I want to give to the Chinese entrepreneurs listening to us tonight is to create an interdependency. To come to your European partner and say, obviously, we are not going to be independent from each other. This doesn't work. If we want to do something big together, you are going to be dependent on me. I am going to be dependent on you. But we together, we have a framework whereby if I lose, you lose. So we forget about the win-win historically because this was 2020, 2001, 2020. The idea today, when you're in an economy of war, you think of the downside before you look at the upside. And this is where also you'll have a different approach between the Chinese entrepreneur usually looking at the upside and the European entrepreneur looking nowadays at the downside. And if the two of you can convince the other one, the European one and the Chinese, if they can convince each other that if it doesn't work, the two of them have more to lose than splitting the pie, then you've got a deal. So don't think that it's going to be and you need to have a very straight talk. What strikes me, I keep on telling my European friends what I love with Chinese partners is that you can have a very, very frank discussion. And at the beginning, be very frank, be very straight and say, here are the conditions for the thing to work. But don't come on believing that if you read the European, the American press, the Chinese press, Europe is dead, Europe has no entrepreneurs, and Europe is collapsing. This is totally wrong. We have a political weakness, but we have many, many companies that are world leaders, that are winning in China, that are winning in the US, that are winning in Southeast Asia. So don't underestimate the quality of the management you are going to meet in Europe. That would be my advice.
Great. So thank you, Dave. You gave us some new, new perspectives. And also, I know that Matthew, you're based in France, and you also have a lot of experience bringing people go to Europe at different places. So Matthew, let me bring you in here as well. You have worked with many executives through learning expeditions. In your experience, what changes when a leader actually spends time in Europe, meets local companies, investors, and institutions? So rather than only reading reports from distance. So what's your opinion? Yeah, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Jade. So yeah, just to give you a bit of context, we are organizing Learn Expedition. Learn Expedition is a program where you will meet other leaders on a strategic topic that you want to explore. I used to do it everywhere in Europe, in different countries, European countries. I was previously based in Shanghai and Singapore, so I did it also in Asia. And I'm always surprised how the culture gap is a challenge for all leaders that look at the new markets. And it's not only Chinese looking at Europe. It can be Singaporean looking at Thailand. It can be French looking at Germany. There's a gap. There's a huge gap, and you really need to live with it and to think about it at every step of the process of exploring your market. So back to Europe, when we organize a learning expedition in Europe, it's true, we have a very different way of explaining things, showing your interest. And the Chinese are quite straightforward, but if you look at the Nordic country, that's not the same way. We cannot be straight. We need to explain things, give the context, and at the end of the discussion, you will understand the interest, the final interest. So that's something you need to learn from. Maybe my trick, and I want to build on what David shared because I think it's really interesting and insightful, is for sure Europeans are security driven, let's say, today. They look at security versus efficiency. And we are really looking at trust. So I think the main reason to not looking at just report, but traveling in Europe is to build the trust with your future partner, whether it's other entrepreneurs, investor, partner. I think it's really building the trust, spending time with those people, explaining how you can build the interdependency, because to show interdependency, it's a way to build the trust in the relationship you want. And I think that's something you have to do in every market that you want to explore, in particular the biggest one in Europe, which is Germany, France, and UK. It's also a matter because it's true, it's a fragmented market, and you have very different ecosystem for each countries. And you need also to learn the ecosystem related to the country that you want to explore. And that's not the same approach to help foreign companies to enter the markets. Sometimes you also can leverage the support of local entities that really want to accelerate and expand with innovation coming from China, because it's true that the cost advantage is not enough. Today, it's really the way China develop innovative products and an innovative way of producing disruptive products. So that's really on that.
Yeah. So thank you, Matthew. I think you also give us some different perspective from the gap on China and Europe, and then see. So next, I also I'd like to back to David. We often hear that simply taking a product or business models that already work in China and then bring it into Europe rarely works. So in your view, what usually needs to change first? So the product itself, the positioning, the partnerships, or the way to build the trust?
Well, probably the best example you've got is the car industry, where you see how a car in Europe and in China has a completely different perception. In China, you're beyond electrical cars, because a car for you is really it's a smartphone on wheels. And what you want, the key criteria is connectivity. And you want an autonomous car because you have a single child civilization. and if you take the car, you're on your own and you don't want to drive, or you share it with friends. So in the future of car in China, by definition, is a shared car and therefore an autonomous car. In Europe, as I told you, we have families of 2 parents and 2 kids. We want to own our car. We want to drive our car ourselves because we enjoy driving, because we don't have 2-hour traffic jam when we're on the countryside, because we have a country house, and on weekends we want to move from the city to the country house. So as a result, you see that what is expected on a car and the key criteria for selling a car are going to be very, very different. And that's because the demography at the beginning is totally different. So it means, and this is where, coming back to your earlier question on what is the mistake you can make, I think one of the mistakes is to look at Europe only as an export market to get rid of overcapacities. Don't consider the European market just as an export target where you sell your product and that's it. Where I see the real upside between in relationship between China and Europe is that, as I told you in my introduction, Europe is extremely clever at breakthrough invention. Conversely, we are very bad. You can't do everything in life, unfortunately. Conversely, we are very bad at monetizing those breakthrough inventions, this disruptive innovation. And if you think about what's been happening so far, is that all our breakthrough innovations have been developed and monetized by the US. This is where China's got an opportunity. The biggest opportunity for China is to come meet some very clever, very innovative European brains and say, we are going to develop Shenzhen speed. And that's where, and the beauty, now what strikes me is that when I speak to French and European companies active in mainland, they say our plant is as competitive as our Chinese, typically in the car supply industry. You've got European car suppliers who say, when I'm in Shenzhen, when I'm in Guangdong, or in Fujian, I'm actually as competitive as my Chinese competitor. It's just when I'm in Europe, I'm not competitive because the ecosystem is an absolute nightmare and I've got a far too high cost structure. So my view is that you come here, obviously with all your innovation, but discuss the innovations. And I'm going to tell our Chinese friends listening tonight what I tell European friends when they tell me, should I come to China? I say, if you want to come to China, come at least once a quarter and every time with an innovation. Don't take a plane to Shenzhen, to Shanghai, if you don't have an innovation, even if it's not ready, to discuss with your Chinese partner your latest innovation in your head. And that's where you've got an opportunity. So if you're Chinese and you want to come to Europe, basically have a recurring contribution. What is not going to work if you come with a one-off, where you say, I've got this product, I'm going to sell it. Let's say you've got your Labubu dolls that you're going to sell for 3 months and you run away. This has no interest. Conversely, if you say, the 21st century is about tech, it's about innovation, it's about cross-fertilization of ideas from different brains coming from different backgrounds. Let's exchange with European friends. And you've got one meeting in Europe every quarter. So you need to commit some time, and you need to commit time. You need to be in Europe, exactly like European guys have to be at least every quarter in mainland. You mainlanders, you need to come to Europe at least every quarter. And every quarter you come, and you come with a kind of innovation, iteration. And then you discuss with European partners. This I find really, really powerful. And this is the way you're going to build trust. The way you're going to build trust is because you are going to come and see my friends in Paris, Berlin, Stockholm, Milan, and you're going to open your mind with the ideas you've got in your head to build the future. And so if you share your plans with me, you show some trust in me. And therefore, I will open my brain to you as well.
Okay.
And that's the way we are going to, I think, go ahead and bring Europe and China closer to each other.
Okay. Actually, you mentioned Shenzhen speed, and one of our audience, my friends, Zhong Kai, he just popped some question. I think it's interesting. You just mentioned Shenzhen. I think there's different innovations here in China.
I'm sure the people listening from Shanghai are going to disagree and say, no, this is Shanghai speed, so but it's okay.
Yeah, sure. I think so people like impression about China. There's Shenzhen is one of the, I think, the city you mentioned, Shenzhen speed. It's very faster. They have the robot, the embodiment. I mean the hardware. There's also another way in near Shanghai and near Shanghai. I don't know if you heard about the city called Yiwu, Zhejiang province.
No.
It's small
Okay.
commodities. Those there's one city which have a market like I think the biggest market in the world for small goods. And I think this is another angle. I think maybe we can discuss later on. So there's two type. One is about the speed. Second, I think is also have some like supply chains in around Shanghai areas. There's lots of they do supply chains. So I will also follow up. For some questions. You also mentioned like the trust. You have to bring up the latest innovation faster, and then share the plan to your partners to do that. So I'm also want to know that from the point of your view from the European partners or clients or institutions, what makes a Chinese company look like credible, serious, and a commitment for a long term, rather than simply trying to like sell quickly or do so? What do you think make Chinese company look credible, serious, and then commitment for a long term? You mentioned like BRD kind of thing. What's your impressions that for a long-term ship like?
Well, first, I think things have dramatically changed over the last 2 years,
Okay.
where China has won incredibly credibility worldwide. When really it's moved from the used to say, okay, this is the workshop of the world, and now we know this is a laboratory of the world. If I take let's say the pharma industry, last year 30% of the new molecules were invented in China. So any Chinese entrepreneur coming now to Europe has come with a background where he's got the credibility of being very innovative, and therefore he starts with what I would call a very good goodwill. So first, don't be shy on being innovative, because now Europeans are well aware that not only China has caught up, but in some cases, typically think about the car industry, think about the renewable industry, think about energy storage. Clearly, China is ahead, not only of Europe, but also the US. So the best solution we know comes from China. Where you will build trust, I think, is in the topics. It's in the topics and the questions you're going to raise. In French, we say you never learn by the answers. You learn by the questions the other one is raising. So if you ask me only questions on how we are going to sell the product, one particular product, over the next months, if you only ask me what is the gross margin and how are we going to split it, then I'm going to be full of mistrust. Because I'm going to say this is a Chinese guy who comes just, or girl, who just comes for 1 month. They're going to stuff me with a product that does not work, and they're going to run away. If conversely you come and we discuss the future of our industry, what is the vision, where we see the technology, how technology is going, how AI is going to impact our industry. Where are we complementary? This is what I bring, this is what I need. So yeah, I'm very honest on telling you, I come to you because this is what I don't have. And I'm here not to, as a result, what I will need from you is not for 1 or 2 months. It's because I want to build something over the next 5-10 years. It's also acknowledging your weaknesses. Saying let's take the car industry in China. Your BYD sales are down 20%, 30% this year. They've just announced their Q1 profits that are sharply down. The EV car market in China is fully penetrated. The Chinese have sold 30 million EVs to the 100 million Chinese who have, as I told you, the purchasing power comparable to Europe. So if you come to me in the car industry and you tell me, I come to Europe, but I've got a tremendous opportunity in my domestic Chinese market, then I will not believe you. If conversely you come and you say, I have fully penetrated my high-end market in China, so I need new markets. You acknowledge your weakness, but at the same time, you've got a car which is much nicer than my cars. So I've got a weakness, you have a weakness. Then we can work together. And this is the way we build trust. So have a long-term view, because to be honest, it's going to take time to penetrate the European market, given its fragmentation. So it does not make sense for a Chinese entrepreneur to come to Europe just to sell one product one-off and disappear. Because this is what some people are doing on Temu and Shine, and this one-off business goes nowhere. It just 3 months and it's gone, and you will not get a European partner. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So come if you've got a long-term vision that you have 2 different markets, you have 2 different demographics, you have two different purchasing powers, and they're very complementary. Think about the complementary. What do you want from your? It's a bit like in the U.S. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was the U.S. president in the 1960s was saying, stop asking the government what he can do for you and ask yourself what you can do for the government. Mm-hmm. So apply the same way of thinking. Stop asking what can this European partner do for me? Obviously, you should ask the question, but ask yourself as well, what can I do for my European partner? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to have a long-term business, which is the only way to, and the beauty, because Europe, despite all its, you'll see, it's a nightmare. It's the legal framework is so complicated, no one understands. The cost base is far too high and so on. But conversely, you have long-term visibility of the ecosystem. So the rule of law, if your European partner misbehaves, you go to a court and you win. Whether you're Chinese or not doesn't make any difference. You win. Mm-hmm. So you have an ecosystem that allows you to think long-term. The rule of law means that you have property rights, and your property rights will never be challenged in Europe. This is why you have trust, and this is why you can think long term. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Good. So let me think about the scenario. I think some of friends post something in the WeChat, say. Like user needs, understand the market. So if say one company in China now, the founder want to came to Europe, so decided that they never did there before. Now they want to do. So what's your so I want to enter Europe in the next 12 months. The company. What's your like top 3 priorities, like suggestions or to them? They like first time like want to go there in 12 months. They want entering Europe. What do you like some to-do list for them?
Yeah, it obviously depends on what the activity of. But the first, as I told you, it's a very fragmented region. So the first question you need to answer is you're going to start small and get bigger. So what country am I going to enter? That's the first question. You have 27 countries in Europe.
Like France.
So you have a choice.
Maybe France.
So it depends on, obviously, France now, the good thing is that France is very welcoming to foreign investment and FDI, so foreign direct investments. Because our country has been obviously suffering, the industry has been suffering from the rise of China over the last 10, 20 years. And now we reckon that to have Chinese investing in France in manufacturing capacity is a very good idea. So again, we see it in the car industry, we see it in the energy storage, EV battery industry. France is open for business. You have countries like Spain. Basically, countries that are in trouble are more open. It may sound bizarre. Germany is a question mark because Germany has been a big winner all along the 2010 decade, and now is turning post-COVID into the biggest loser vis-à-vis China with a 90 billion euro trade deficit. So that's the first advice, is choose your country. The second advice is when you come, speak to different stakeholders. It's a bit like if you come to China, you're thinking about a European going to China, you go and see the mayor of the city, not only your Chinese partner. So understand, meet bankers. So meet obviously French entrepreneurs, meet bankers because they are going to obviously to minimize risk. You want to borrow money locally. You want local banks to finance your local business so that if it doesn't work, you can run away and you leave the debt with the bank. It's part of risk management. Meet politicians, because although European politicians on average are of a very low, it's probably the biggest surprise a Chinese entrepreneur is going to get is the difference in quality between a mayor in China who's very pro-business and wants to develop businesses in his city, and European politicians, European mayors who on average are very, very low quality people. So, but obviously within each country, there are exceptions, and in the middle, you have some very, very capable politicians that are going to help you. So you need to replicate. Think about the ecosystem you've built in China to be so successful. And you need to replicate the same. Meet suppliers, because you will need a supply chain, exactly like in China, and meet some clients.
Yeah. You
and
mentioned
tell them,
like,
if I come...
You mentioned different countries like Germany, Spain.
Please.
Yes. And also the mayors, I think. So let me like close one at the same time, like from your perspective today, where do you see the most promising opportunities for Chinese companies in Europe, like in terms of sections, collaboration models, or market entry angles? Do you have some like promising opportunities for those Chinese companies? Do you see that some angles, some opportunities?
Yeah, the biggest one is the environmental transition by far. We're having, this is where we are in total disagreement with, I wouldn't say the US, but half of the US, because I think half of the US has understood that the climate change is a real issue, and half of the US is in denial. China is going full speed. China has understood this is a competitive advantage for the 21st century, and China is delivering. So the only problem we're having is that at this stage, we think that if we buy a Chinese solution, we put our security at risk. And that's the biggest opportunity. Europe really wants to do this environmental transition. Europe is very keen to have Chinese technology, which in many areas is ahead of the European technology. We just have a slight problem to solve, which is how do we manage to overcome this prejudice that we are putting our security at risk. And this is where I go back to the concept of interdependence. Interdependence is very interesting.
Great. So thanks, David. So you give.
Sorry, and we've talked.
Yeah.
So if I can add, because
please.
On the consumer, because we've talked a lot about corporate capex and investment infrastructure, but don't forget the consumer.
Yes.
Although culturally the regions are very different. We all doing selfies now with our smartphones everywhere in the world. This was invented in China. Live streaming, if you've got a consumer product, live streaming is dramatically underdeveloped in Europe. So you have, I think in terms of marketing and selling techniques, we've seen some amazing selling techniques being developed in China that can be translated into Europe, taking advice from your local marketing and advertising agencies to tell you, given the cultural differences, this is how we are going to adapt it to European culture. But from what Biden has been doing, what TikTok, the success of TikTok in Europe is just amazing. So on the consumer front, and remember one big difference is that in China, the consumer money is with the young people, because the grandparents don't spend and give their money to the grandchild. In Europe, the money is with the old people, because the grandparents keep the money and don't give it to the grandchildren. So you'll have to be a bit tricky, but this is where your marketing and advertising agency in Europe is going to tell you, okay, your technology is super attractive, very clever. We just need to adapt it to the elderly. How do we do it? And this is where you're going to have fun. Work together. This is where you have fun.
You mentioned a very interesting point of view. I think it's like maybe TikTok is one of I think young people use that. So live stream. You mentioned live stream. Yeah, it's very popular in China, or very a lot of people use that. So I think we can do the Chinese company use the technicals. So before we go to the Q&A with the audience, I have one question for Matthews. So thank you, David, for all the input. So, and I want Matthew, maybe let me ask you one final practical questions from your experience. Why is physical presence, like actually going there, meeting people and experience the market firsthand, is so important when it comes to building trust, you mentioned, and avoid misjudgments. So over to Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Jade. So I think before you move to a country to meet the ecosystem, it's very important to have strategic assumptions that you really want to go through in order to understand what are the key stakeholders that you want to meet. That's probably the first step before you move to a country. And then you can build a program. That's really what we do during our learning expedition. And I can share a very interesting story of a client. He was 2 years ago that wanted to invest $500 million in Nigeria. So it's not Europe, it's Nigeria. The risk is not the same, of course. And it was a conglomerate with 6-7 branches operating in their country, all leader in their industry. So it was IT, it was micro-lending, it was the automotive industry. And they were thinking about expanding in Nigeria and investing this huge amount of money. And we designed this learning expedition where we exactly met what David mentioned. We've met the lawyer, we've met the governor of the region, we've met entrepreneurs, we've met investor banks, we've met suppliers and partners for different type of industry that they wanted to explore. And we've met also because they had a small branch with a GM with a small team, and the GM was sharing insight about the country that was looking like crazy. So they didn't know if they can trust and rely on this general manager locally. So we spent 5 days in Lagos. We've met all those people. It was super interesting. We've met also the GM of Coca-Cola and the GM of Microsoft. And the GM of Coca-Cola explained how he invests in this country, but also how, because he was profitable, how he get the money outside of the country. And he was explaining that it's not possible to do it in this country. So for many, many reasons, they decided to not invest in the country because the risk was too high, and they get a deep understanding of what is happening there. Just a few months later, we did this program in another country, was in the Middle East, and they decided to invest because they got clarity, because they got trusted partner. They build the trust with different stakeholders, and they get clear answer to the question. So that's really where I see the value of being on the ground and really meet people, because it helps to expand your network and to be a relationship that will impact the future of what you want to build there. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking about the value of traveling.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Matthew. You give us a very good example that this is also one of the audience mentioned that some groups in China. There's a lots of like business groups. Different city have their different associations, and then these associations do a lot of connections, as you mentioned, meet their people, and then see it will impact their connection to building trust. I find one of the very interesting questions. I want to close the final question for David. So the question is, for a Chinese company with limited resources, what should be the priorities when entering the Europes? So if the company didn't have so much resources, what do you have suggestions for them to enter in Europe?
My suggestion is that if you have limited human and financial resources, and I put the two because it's not only money. Europe is time consuming and is human consuming. What you should be looking for is a distribution partner to start with. So look for a European distributor who's got access to, I'll give you an example. I've got a friend who does this in the medical technology industry, where you sell to European hospitals. It's very difficult as a Chinese to turn up in a European hospital, even if you're Mindray with fantastic products, it's very, very difficult to get access. So be asset light, be resource light, find a European distributor, and this person is going to be the face of your, so it's going to be a local face of your company in China. So you put very little capex, you put very little human resource, you might send one person at the distributor, and if your business develops enough, after a certain volume of business, you set up your own subsidiary. And if I may just add something on the previous because I forgot to tell you the best idea how to build trust. One of my friends has been going to China for many, many times, and he's got a fantastic Chinese partner, and he's got a 5-year-old kid. This is like 10 years ago, and both of them have 5-year-old kids. And each time my French friend was coming to China, the Chinese partner would have a gift for his child. And each time my friend was coming back to Paris with the chain. And my friend at some stage said, this doesn't work. I need to bring my son because the two have to meet each other. So the two kids, 5-year-old, met in China. And this is a way of showing that what you do, the business you're building together, is for the next generations. So my advice to all the entrepreneurs that listen to us tonight, if you've got a child and you go to Europe, bring your child with you to Europe. First, because it's extremely interesting. The learning expedition, Matthew knows very well that learning expeditions are always extremely insightful. So Europe is a very pleasant place. Your way of life is wonderful, but also you will show that you have a long-term vision on Europe and a long-term commitment because you want the next generation to keep on working on it. So that's a small advice, but it can have a huge impact.
Great. Thank you, David. I think it's a small. I think it's always like a future is always in young people. I think there's as you mentioned, like a different platform. In China, we have also, of course, TikTok, but we also have like Bilibili. So where young people gathering together. So I think new channels. If we have a platform for young people to meet together and then have the opportunity to build connections, that's really important for future long-term relationships. And I think that's mostly for today's. And then I don't know if Matthew have some comments for our today's topic. Yeah.
I think, first of all, thank you, David, for sharing this. I think it was super insightful. I hope it gives the sense that Europe is an opportunity, and you will want to explore more European countries. There's a lot of opportunities there, and a lot of, as David said, good entrepreneurs and good connections to get. So hopefully, the audience will find opportunities for their business and their companies. So thank you.
Great. So thank you, David. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I think it's great. We can have this opportunity to hear your voice. And I think one message we kept coming back to tonight is that Europe is not an easy market, but for companies that are willing to understand it, respect it, and then want to build long-term relationships, it remains a market well worth taking seriously. And mostly thank you all of people join tonight with us for all of your questions. You're interested in Europe global expansions and also innovation learning journeys. We hope that you will also continue to follow us on our events and in the futures. Yeah. So we also have emails here. We have a website, ChinaInnovationIsEverywhere.com. If you want to connect with us, you also want to follow up with David, feel free to connect to us. And thank you, David. Thanks for your
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye. 谢谢钟凯，谢谢大家谢谢大家的活动。So， 最后的话我会放一个视频，然后我们结束。谢谢大家的参与。我们接下来呢 ，so I will play a video and then we close up. 好，我们看一个视频，然后我们就结束今天的直播。
会议室的白板写满了方向，却不知道答案在哪里生长。每一个问题都值得出发，走进真实世界去寻找它。不是旅行，不是参观，是带着问题踏上远征，与创造者对话，像真实案例学，让视野打破惯性的墙。走出会议室，进入真实的光，在变化发生的地方，站在最前方，和同行者相遇，和未来交锋，把灵感变公式，把见闻变方向。这是 Learning Expedition， 一次真正的远征，不只是看见未来，而是把未来带回来。创业者眼中有明天的路，领袖们谈起下一轮的局。另一个市场，另一家公司，另一个人在解决同样的题。很多时候最好的答案不在报告里，不在数据表，它在一次深夜的对话里，在另一个市场正在发生的变化。带着问题出发，带着公式回来，主旨的未来，从这一步开始改变。走出